I paid off my parents' mortgage in full as an anniversary gift, and my sister-in-law moved her family into the basement before they even knew the house was theirs free and clear. I'm 31, a nurse practitioner at a clinic in Halifax, and for 9 years I lived like someone half my income didn't exist. Extra shifts at a walk-in clinic on weekends, no trips south during the winters everyone else fled for, a car I kept until the heat stopped working properly. My husband Dean used to tease me about it, gently, the way you tease someone you respect too much to actually push. He'd ask what exactly I was saving for, and I'd just say, "You'll see," because saying it out loud felt like it might jinx it. My parents bought their house in Dartmouth in 1986, back when a young couple with one income from the shipyard could still manage a mortgage on a modest street near the harbor. My dad, Gordon, spent 34 years there, first on the floor and later supervising crews, the kind of job that puts a permanent ache in your lower back and a stubborn pride in your chest. My mom, Eleanor, worked the front desk at a dental office for most of that, and somewhere in the middle of it, she also managed to raise me and my younger brother, Patrick, mostly on her own during the stretches, when Dad was doing overtime to keep the mortgage payments steady. They refinanced twice. Once when the roof needed replacing, once when I was in nursing school, and they quietly covered a gap in my OSAP funding they never told me about until years later. By the time I found out, I'd already moved out, already married, already started doing the math in my head about what I owed them. Their 40th anniversary was coming up in November, and I'd been tracking their remaining mortgage balance for almost 2 years, ever since my dad mentioned offhand at Thanksgiving that they'd be paying it off sometime around when I'm 71, God willing. I called the bank. I found out exactly what was left, exactly what the payout figure would be if someone wanted to clear it in one lump sum. Then I started building toward that number like it was a finish line, only I could see. It took me a little under 2 years between extra shifts, a small inheritance from my grandmother that I never touched for anything else, and selling a parcel of land up near Truro that Dean and I had bought early in our marriage, thinking we'd build a cottage on it one day. We never built anything there. Selling it felt less like giving something up and more like turning it into something that actually mattered. I told exactly 2 people. Dean, obviously, because he was the one who helped me track down the mortgage discharge paperwork and dealt with our lawyer to make sure everything would be done properly and legally before the anniversary. And my brother Patrick, who lives out in Calgary now, and helped me coordinate flights and timing from 3 time zones away, mostly by being the one person I trusted not to let it slip during a family phone call. I did not tell Dean's sister Whitney anything. And in hindsight, that omission is the only part of this story I'd actually do differently, because it turns out silence reads as opportunity to some people. I need to back up for a second and explain Whitney, because she matters to everything that happened after. Whitney is 2 years older than Dean, married to a man named Cole who works in oil and gas and is gone for stretches at a time, and she has never, not once in the 8 years I've known her, missed a chance to make a comment about money in a way that's dressed up as concern. Things like, "It must be nice not having kids yet. You probably have so much extra room in your budget." Or, "I just worry sometimes that Dean married someone so focused on her career." Delivered with a smile so warm, you'd almost miss the knife in it if you weren't paying attention. She'd made comments about my parents too, more than once. Things about how some families just never quite get ahead, no matter how hard they work, which she always said like it was a sad observation about the world, rather than the insult it actually was. Dean had promised more than once over the years that he'd talk to her. He never quite did, not seriously, because Whitney has a way of making any pushback feel like you're the one being dramatic. I'd stopped expecting it. I told myself this gift had nothing to do with the Holloway side of things. Sorry, the Pierce side. Dean's family is the Pierces. And that paying off my own parents' mortgage with my own money was the one thing in this entire marriage that belonged completely and only to me. I was wrong about that. The same way you're wrong about a lot of things right up until the moment you're proven wrong in someone's driveway. The anniversary fell on a Saturday in November. I'd planned everything around a dinner at my parents' own house. Something simple and warm, the discharge papers framed and wrapped like a present, sitting on the kitchen table where my mom always puts the mail. I'd arranged for a caterer to drop off a proper dinner that afternoon, so my mom wouldn't have to cook on her own anniversary, hung string lights along their back deck, because my mom loves anything that twinkles, and put together a photo collage spanning 4 decades that I'd been collecting from old albums for months. Dean flew in from a work trip in Calgary the night before, and his parents, Brenda and Roger, along with Whitney and Cole, offered to drive over early and help set everything up, while I went to pick my own parents up from their friend's place across town, where I'd arranged for them to spend the afternoon under the pretense of a casual visit. That detail should have told me everything. It didn't, not until I was standing in the driveway. I picked my parents up around 4. My mom had on the navy dress she wears to weddings, my dad in the good sweater my mom always makes him wear for photos, both of them assuming we were just heading back home for a quiet family dinner. The drive took 15 minutes, and the whole way my mom talked about nothing in particular, about her garden, about a recipe she wanted to try, completely unaware that in 15 minutes her entire financial life was about to change. When we pulled up, I knew immediately something was wrong. The string lights I'd hung myself the day before were gone, pulled down and coiled in a heap by the porch steps. The framed photo collage I'd spent months putting together wasn't on the mantel where I'd left it visible through the front window. Instead, there were boxes. Actual moving boxes, stacked along the side of the garage, and a U-Haul trailer hitched to Cole's truck, parked crooked in my parents' own driveway like it belonged there. And standing on the front steps, arms crossed, was Whitney. My mom got out of the car first, still smiling, still thinking this was a quiet family dinner. She made it about 4 steps up the walkway before Whitney came down off the porch, pointed past her toward the street, and said, loud enough that the neighbor 2 doors down actually came out onto her own porch to look, "This is our space now. You're going to have to figure out somewhere else." My mom froze. My dad's hand went to her shoulder, the way it does when he doesn't understand what's happening, but knows instinctively he needs to protect her from it. My mom's eyes filled immediately, that particular kind of hurt and confusion crashing into each other at once, because as far as she knew, she had just been told to leave her own home in front of her own daughter and the neighbors. I hadn't said a single word yet. I was still by the car, keys in my hand, watching my mother's hands start to shake. That's when I walked up the driveway and everything went quiet. Whitney turned at the sound of my footsteps, and for half a second, before she composed herself into something smoother, I saw it. Not confusion. Not surprise. The look of someone who'd just been caught mid-sentence, not mid-misunderstanding. "Marisol," she said, smoothing her jacket, using the voice she usually saves for hosting Thanksgiving, "this isn't what it looks like." "Then tell me what it looks like," I said, keeping my voice level. The same tone I use with a patient's family when I have to deliver something they don't want to hear, and there's no version of it that gets softer with more words. Because right now it looks like you just told my mother to leave her own home. Cole appeared in the doorway behind her, holding one end of a bookshelf, and had the decency to look like he wanted to set it down and walk straight back out to the truck. He didn't say anything. He just stood there, eyes fixed somewhere past my shoulder. Whitney recovered the way she always does, fast and smooth. "Roger and Gordon talked about this house weeks ago," she said, gesturing vaguely toward the open door like that explained anything at all. "We assumed, with the location, with everything Dean's mentioned about you two, eventually wanting more space for a family, that this was meant to be something shared. We figured we'd start moving a few things in to help get organized before winter." I let that sit in the cold November air for a moment, because I wanted everyone standing there, including my own parents, to absorb the sheer audacity of it. "You assumed a house my parents have owned outright as of 3 days ago, that I paid off with my own money, that I never once mentioned to you, was somehow available for you to move into," I said. "Whitney, what is going on?" Dean said, and I turned to see him walking up from the second car, where he'd just finished unloading the catering trays. His face had gone pale. His eyes moved from his sister to the boxes stacked by the garage, then to my mom, still frozen on the walkway, silent tears running down her face now, my dad's arm fully around her shoulders. "Dean, we were only trying to help everyone get settled before the holidays." Whitney started, and he held up a hand, and I watched something shift in his face that I'd been waiting 8 years to see. "Whose name is on the deed to this house?" he's asked her. She didn't answer right away. "Whose name, Whitney?" "Gordon and Eleanor's," she said finally, quieter now, the confidence draining out of her voice for the first time since we'd pulled up. "Then it's not shared family space. It's my wife's parents' house, free and clear, and you had no right to put a single box inside it, let alone tell my mother-in-law to find somewhere else to go." He turned to his own parents, who'd come out onto the porch by then, his mother Brenda holding a lamp that clearly wasn't hers. His father Roger standing stiff and silent near the door. "Dad, did you know about this?" Roger nodded slowly, his face tight with something that finally looked like real shame. And that single nod told me everything I needed to know, that this had not been some spontaneous mix-up born out of good intentions gone sideways. This had been planned, quietly, over weeks, built on the assumption that anything I did or built or paid off eventually belonged to the Pierce family ledger, that my parents, who'd never had much, wouldn't have the standing to object if their own daughter's husband's family decided their house had a better use. It had never really been about needing space. It was about the same pattern Whitney had been running since the day I married into that family, the quiet, persistent suggestion that my side of things mattered less. That my parents, who didn't have a cottage at the lake or a boat in the driveway, were the kind of family you could quietly absorb into your own plans without asking. I walked past Whitney up the steps and started carrying boxes back out onto the lawn. Nobody stopped me. Dean joined in without a word, hauling out a dresser that wasn't his, a set of patio furniture that wasn't his. Roger followed, silently helping load things back into the U-Haul, his expression heavy with an embarrassment that, for once, looked completely genuine. Whitney stood on the steps for a long moment, watching her own son carry, watching her husband carry, watching her brother carry her belongings back out of a house she'd tried to claim. When she finally spoke again, her voice had lost every bit of its earlier certainty. "I just thought our family should have something solid going forward," she said. "This was never your future to plan," I told her. "This is 40 years of two people working themselves to the bone so they'd own something outright before they died, and none of us get to take credit for that, least of all you." They left about 25 minutes later, the U-Haul pulling out of the driveway crooked the same way it had pulled in. The quiet they left behind was nothing like the quiet that had fallen when I first walked up that driveway. This quiet was clean. My mom was still shaking, but my dad had stopped trembling, and slowly, as the trailer turned the corner at the end of the street, I watched the tension actually leave his shoulders for what felt like the first time all afternoon. We spent the rest of that evening doing what I'd actually planned. I rehung the string lights myself along the back deck. Dean reset the photo collage that had gotten knocked over in the chaos, smoothing the corners of pictures from my parents' wedding, from my own childhood, from Patrick's high school graduation. By the time the caterer's food was warmed back up, my parents were sitting at their own kitchen table, in their own house, with a framed mortgage discharge letter sitting where the mail usually goes. Finally, completely, theirs. My mom cried again that night, but it was a different kind of crying. The kind that comes after the fear has passed, and there's nothing left underneath it but relief. My dad sat at the head of the table for a long time afterward, not saying much, just running his thumb along the edge of the frame. The way he's always processed the things that matter most, quietly and without an audience. 34 years of mortgage payments, finally over, in a house no one was ever going to be able to move into, out from under them again.